Hi, it's Lee, and welcome to the Test Economist. We're hearing it again. The Chinese are going to invade the US with their low-cost electric vehicles. We've been hearing it for years now, but some people still seem to think this happens. Authoritative people in the community. I don't like naming people in the community I disagree with. I think it's bad form. Instead, I take their rhetoric and give my own opinion without insulting them or anything remotely similar. But it doesn't matter how well respected they are in the community, or even if it may make me unpopular, I will keep giving my opinion as to how I think this industry will go from my background. Other people who have these views are doing it based on their background, except often they are so credible in their own background, they like to step out of their fields and start talking about other areas too. But it doesn't matter who they are, I will happily let you know that I disagree with them, which doesn't mean I don't respect them, at least in their fields. I've even said when I think Elon is wrong too, like with Dogecoin. Anyway, the narrative is that the Chinese EVs are going to take over the US auto market, and the basis of this is due to the fact that something similar happened in the 70s and 80s with Japanese cars. Although the Japanese didn't even get majority market share, and there was no equivalent domestic auto manufacturer back then, as in an American compact that was even more fuel efficient, better MPG, safer, higher options, quicker, nicer, better performance and handling with better technology, etc. As in other words, there's already a very competent domestic EV manufacturer in the US called Tesla. Personally, I don't want a duopoly of cars available either, as in just Tesla or Chinese EVs. I'm an auto enthusiast, and I think all nations have their own styles and competitive advantages, and hope that is what we see. I want a variety for the consumer. I want to drive on the road and see creative features and designs. I want engineers from different cultures to come up with unique ideas that can be shared by all. I mean, look at the French. What a creative bunch they were when it came to autos, with all those uncanny styles and designs. Then the Swedish, who cared about safety with cars like Volvo and Saab, and ended up inventing the 3-point seatbelt. The design and style that came from Italy, the efficiency of cost that came from the Japanese with processes like just-in-time delivery, the class and prestige from England. And then there's America, the amount of car you got for the money, a big car with a lot of features for relatively low cost, but not particularly fun to drive when compared to a German car with exceptional handling and performance. And China's cheap EVs too, for people who just want to go from A to B. Anyway, who am I to be talking about China's economy? Just because I've read a few books and been there 3 times and done a little bit of business there, nothing compared to even many of you listening now, I'm sure. And I listen to those of you who have lived, worked there, or travelled there regularly on business. Sure, I do go over all the financials of the Chinese EV companies regularly and report about their progress. But perhaps it's me who is being naive, thinking that financials actually matter in a communist regime. And the continual comments I get about the fact that the CCP will just keep supporting these EV companies are right, and won't let them go out of business. The CCP just want jobs created, not necessarily profitable businesses. Well, for starters, the subsidies for EVs in China is dwindling. So what would be next? Nationalisation? If NIO goes under, will the government take them over? Most of these Chinese EVs have a burn rate of about 2 more years remaining. After that, their capital is gone and they're bankrupt. And that's if they don't ramp up and cost even more. That's with the current subsidies, which are going to end sometime soon, implying their demand will drop because their prices will rise, or their profit will drop because they have to lower their prices to bring back the demand. Except we're seeing BYD already starting to raise their prices. There are a lot of Chinese EV companies, and people say that is an issue for Tesla in China with all that competition. Except there's still only one Tesla in China. Just like there is only one company that can make the iPhone too. And the prestige of brands are also important to the Chinese. So if you think all these additional Chinese EV companies are competition for Tesla, they're much more competition to one another, all at similar price points, with low quality, low range, cheap EVs with no competitive advantage over one another. They're far more likely to put one another out of business rather than Tesla, and are also preventing one another hitting economies of scale or volume production. Tesla also have additional markets to export to as well, and profitably, might I add. But not only that, Tesla is actually manufacturing locally in other markets. Now, it's one thing competing against Tesla on your home turf with subsidies and local resources. It's another trying to compete with Tesla by exporting to a market where Tesla is manufacturing domestically, which is going to continue to be the case as Tesla open up more factories in more markets due to such incredible economies of scale through so much demand for their products. Tesla is able to set up factories for all markets. But the narrative here is the market for the US, not just where Tesla has local manufacturing, in fact 2 factories even, and another one likely on the way soon too, but where Tesla is also based, their home turf. And Americans love buying American brands. In fact, so does the rest of the world. America has the top brands in the world, and Tesla is becoming an ever stronger brand continually. That brand alone carries a lot of value. However, it is also accompanied by so much value in the vehicle. Well, not just the vehicle, but the charging network too, and the service centres. Although I understand they aren't great everywhere yet, but I think it's just growing pains. Although it might make you wonder, if Tesla service centres are having this many issues, then how would Chinese EVs cope? Especially when they don't have the economies of scale of one brand with only about 2 models. Yet we expect BYD, Polestar, NIO, XPeng, Li, Geely, CATL, and a plethora of others to all have a network of service centres. Oh, and likely with multiple models to have to work on and manage. I'm sorry, but this alone I find very hard to believe. Possibly BYD is large enough to set up in California perhaps. But wait, the Japanese did it. Well, the likes of Honda were already selling in the US. They had motorcycle dealerships. Right, dealerships too. They take a while to set up. Or they may end up doing what BYD are doing with some of their international sales and going through traditional dealer networks, losing one of the vertical integration advantages that Tesla has in order to keep costs so much lower, thus affecting margin or having to raise prices. As would also the import tariffs. I think it's around 20% that the Chinese EVs would have to pay just in tariffs. There would also be a substantial shipping cost going across the Pacific, then the delivery cost to wherever it is headed in the US. Although if they're just concentrating on California to start with, then perhaps not too major. Still, that's probably around an additional $6,000 cost advantage that Tesla has making them locally, maybe $10,000 including dealers. Wow, I think we're already at price parity for a BYD equivalent against a Tesla, as in electric sedan for electric sedan, if we exclude the additional range and performance and extras that you get from a Tesla. Oh, and we still have these Chinese EVs selling at a loss. And by the sounds of it, Tesla's eventually reducing in price due to further cost savings. Except we didn't even get to the good bit. The Tesla consumer will be getting a $7,500 rebate. Then Tesla get perhaps a further $4,000 in battery subsidies. The imported Chinese EVs get nothing. In other words, even if China sold their vehicles at break-even, as in 0% operating margin, then a Tesla would still be perhaps $10,000 less and offer a lot more value. Assuming Tesla don't raise their prices, which is moot anyway, because if they had to, then Tesla would sell every car they make either way. But perhaps it's about numbers. Perhaps the Chinese can just make so many and people just want EVs and the ICE industry has collapsed and there's nothing else available and Teslas have massive waiting lists. Can these other EVs scale fast enough? Faster than Tesla? After the Chinese EVs serving their domestic market, of course, it would only be the leftovers that they could export. The leftovers of what they weren't exporting to less competitive, potentially profitable markets. However, there is also the awakening giants known as US legacy autos. They have something these Chinese EVs don't have. Tens of billions of dollars to invest in cell and battery factories. Brands that people trust. A dealer and service network, along with subsidies and incentives. Not only that, they can also offer long enough range for the target market. Americans seem to want around 300 miles of range, or at least close to that. For the Europeans or the Chinese, it would seem range is not as important. And Chinese EVs are becoming so popular because they're making so many with LFP cells, which only offer usually around 200 miles of range. Due to such large budgets from legacy autos, this will mean they can manufacture around 4 million EVs a year just in the US in the next few years. It is taking them a while to get there, but they'll go from a small number to a large quantity very quickly once their factories are complete and ramped up. Legacy invested in nickel-based cells and are aiming for around 300 miles of range, and will likely be able to offer these vehicles at a lower cost than the Chinese EVs, especially when you factor in the range for the money. Yes, the CCP love their EV industry because it creates so many jobs. Well, there's also a socialist side to the US too, along with the UAW, and US government, who also love how much employment legacy autos creates for the US. And the government is going to do what it can to keep these jobs. And Ford even hit an impressive milestone of 150,000 Mach-E's now, and the F-150 Lightning will likely be even more popular and possibly profitable, especially with the tax credits and subsidies. Well, the Chinese can just start making their cars in the US too then, and benefit from all the subsidies. They can start making their own cells. BYD know how to make cells. Absolutely. I don't think there's any reason why they can't. Except, how long will it take them to locate the factory, design the factory, build it, find all the local components, resources that Tesla struggled with so much that they had to vertically integrate? Then ramp up the production of these factories to half volume production, compared to Tesla, likely to hit 4 to 5 times volume production. This would take likely 4 years for them in a market they're not familiar with, probably more. It's taking US legacy autos almost that long just for their cell factories. But the Chinese EVs would have to do this without their number one advantage, China, the low cost of labour and manufacturing, along with all the other local low-cost suppliers of components that they need. Just look at how well Rivian is going. They're losing an absolute fortune. So bear in mind, we're talking about companies already losing a fortune to then go and attempt a foreign market with overheads so much higher, tougher competition, and nowhere near the capital that Rivian has. If they attempted this, it would bankrupt them almost instantly. The overall point I'm really trying to make is just because someone is very credible in one area of automotive, or the economy, investing, Tesla, batteries, or whatever, it doesn't mean they can predict the future of the industry. The research they do may let them jump to these assumptions, but the research I do says the contrary. It's up to you to work it out for yourself. I can only give you my opinion, but that's the only opinion I'll ever give, and I will not simply go along with the narrative of the rest of the community just to be popular. I think the US EV invasion, for the record, a description I don't like, will be Tesla. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.